Next up, we have a panel. We're just going to do some chair shifting on the stage. But we'll have a panel on, is using a web shop or third-party payment solution worth it? So we'll bring them up in a second, but we've got Thomas Huxter from Raptor PR, we'll have David Vogelpohl again from FastSpring, David Mason from Rovio, Conor McLaughlin from Aghanim, and Jessica Sundell from Stash. But before we come up, I'm just going to grab a last chair.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. We've got a D2C battle royale for you today to hear about, well, from some of the experts in the industry about, their respective platforms and strategies for, maximizing direct-to-consumer. Should we start with some super quick intros to each of you and the companies you work for? I mean, you've heard from David, but a quick recap, David.
I'm David Vogelpohl. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of FastSpring. We're a direct-to-consumer payment platform.
Hi. Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm a product designer at Stash. I've been developing product, mobile games, and working for Rovio, Next Games, Unity, and Stash. And I'm bringing to this panel today my knowledge about free-to-play games and players' behaviors.
Hi there, my name is Conor McLaughlin. I used to work at Liftoff Mobile. I come from ads, so one of those people. I headed up all of our new business strategy at Liftoff, helping publishers monetize via increases in CPMs. Now I'm in a much more interesting space, which is the kind of DTC or D2C, I never really know which one to say, kind of publisher enablement space, and I work at Aghanim. I'm the VP of Revenue at Aghanim.
Hi, I'm David Mason. So I'm from Rovio. I'm lead the business unit, which we call Beacon. Beacon provides the game as a service platform that's leveraged by Rovio Studios, but also by Sega as well now. And as part of that, I've led the work on building Reds Club, which is our direct-to-consumer kind of approach, which we'll talk about a little bit today.
Great, thank you. I mean, it's probably easiest to start from the premise that web shops and D2C are worth it, or can be worth it. Maybe we should talk a little bit about, in particular, who they can be most worth it for, potentially. Is there a specific kind of criteria in terms of company, genres of game, and obviously monetization methods?
I don't necessarily think that you want to exclude any genres, right? I mean, coming from an in-app ads background, you see a lot of hyper-casual guys right now, namely kind of Voodoo, Quali, all these publishers trying to get more and more into the IAP space. So I don't think that there's no opportunity for hyper-casual. I actually think that hyper-casual has a very big opportunity going forward. However, to David's point in the previous session, you're looking for whales, right? You're looking for your highest value user, in my opinion, in every game, because 0.5 to 2% of most games in the mid-core and hardcore genre, they're spending. They're making up a large 50%, 30 to 50% higher portion of your overall revenue. As soon as you get those guys over to a web shop solution, that's where it becomes very worth it, right? But I wouldn't exclude any particular genre in that, in our space.
If I can build on the top of that, so I think in general, we're going to be looking at mobile free-to-play, but what matters really is that you have a game that generates revenue through IAPs, right? Yep. And you have a dedicated player base with the top 1%, which is the top 1% players, which is high spenders that you really want to reach out. So to go back to what you were saying, so this is really this shift that you really want to have. You want to have this 1% top player shift and try to have the behavior shifting from spending in game to your store, right? So it's really about behavior, about bringing more value, about understanding the limitation on what they have in the game and trying to really bring more value on the web.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that, because I think when we talk about this topic, we quickly get into, can we generate more profit? Can we drive purchases? And actually, that's the wrong mindset to have in this. what you need to think about is, what are you trying to bring to your players in terms of value? What is, fundamentally the value proposition you're building and the features to support that. So the Rovio approach is much more, yes, we have a web shop, but actually the fundamental question is, how do we build a long-term relationship with valuable players in our games, and what can we bring that we can't bring in a mobile experience? And for us, we're fortunate, we have a movie coming, we have announced movie 3, that brings a whole piece of players that we want to bring into our games, and that means we want to connect digital experiences from the movie into the game as well. So strategically, you can use all of your kind of avenues to reach players. But then also, when we talk about play on the web as well, many of us have Facebook games. This is an opportunity to really also drive web-based play and desktop experience, and the reasons why people play casual games on desktop versus mobile, particularly competitive games. But I think you will fail if you start by thinking, I'm going to do this for the money, because you won't get players. Then you'll get some, but you won't deliver something of value to the players that's meaningful.
Player value is a great point to point out there, David. The only thing I would personally add on all this is scale. If you have a new game, if you haven't really scaled up your player base, it's probably not worth it to mess with the web shop right now. You need to build and grow your community. You need to grow adoption and time spent playing the game. So that's the other kind
and to David's
filter.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. Yeah.
To David's previous point in the previous session, again, to bring it back to what you were saying, and also I think it's all about audience engagement. Right? You have to have an audience engagement extension platform for users to actually continue to come back and to make it an extension of your app. So as long as you brand it associated with the look and flow of your app, I think that users will come back, or your game will come back consistently.
Very interesting. David, I think you mentioned almost, by having another touch point or set of touch points with users, that offers some advantages in terms of building relationships. Open to the floor, what are the particular benefits that you see in terms of, I guess, owning data and the way that gives you, opportunities to market differently in different ways, and also what are the kind of additional features and mechanisms that developers should be looking to have as part of their D2C strategy? For example, a metagame feature, for example. Two-layered question.
Yeah, maybe I can talk a little bit about what we've done and kind of where we're headed as well. But fundamentally, we built out some key capabilities. So we have, Reds Club is the domain that people go to. It supports multiple games. We're live with Angry Birds Friends today. But we deliberately chose, Red because of the IP that we hold dear. And and the fact that that resonates with our audience and all of our game players that play Angry Birds games. But then we built Red ID, so you can sign in the game, sign in the web stores, and you need that piece to connect. Because at the end of the day, if you're doing something in the web, that experience also needs to appear in the game. Whether you're bringing, let's say you have something you're providing for players every day, or the offers you're providing, it needs to appear. So you need that connection. But then it also gives you ability to communicate with the players. You get email, you can get other data as well, and build that direct relationship. But then, we built out blog content, offers, we can segment and target as well. But we want to go further, and we plan to bring play on the web. We plan to bring features that are, extensions. So, for example, we already have level design capabilities. So, bringing these kind of things, so that actually it becomes somewhere where you build a community, not just a web shop. So.
I can maybe add on that also. So, in terms of features, you really want to have engagement features. Right? So we're thinking about, for instance, loyalty programs, players' guides, user-generated content. We want to do it more like an experience ritual. So it's not only about monetizing, it's also about really creating value, right? On the top of that, you have to think about really adding some good incentives for players to be able to see to shift their behavior, spend the behavior from in-game to the web store. So those incentives, you really have to look at what players want, what are their motivation, and then look at where are the limitations of the in-game store, right? So you can really start designing a personal experience. You can really give, for instance, early access to game content. You can give exclusive offers, bonuses, rewards, all these kind of things. And what you have to do also is to start shifting or creating a habit of visiting the store daily. So for that, for example, you start giving them daily gift to claims and all these kind of things. So there's a lot of strategy to build a very rich experience and not only a web store.
Yeah, you want loyalty programs. As Jessica said, you want all of these things to basically continue to build loyalty to your hub. For us at Aghanim, we're actually, and this might come as a surprise, David and I were talking about this before, but for us at Aghanim, we're actually driving users directly to content. We're not driving users directly to a store. And what that enables us to do is that enables us to essentially put icons in the game where we're able to drive users direct to what we're calling a game hub. We're driving users direct to game hub. As a result, we're seeing daily transaction rates of 14 to 20% within the first week, which is really, really exciting because if you're driving users to content, you are fully compliant with Apple and Google's laws and you do not run into that 27% fee. And to your profitability point, David, you were talking about Playtika at 8%. Playtika is at a profitability level of 8% because they're using all of this budget and resources to market to users who live in an app, outside of an app, to drive those users who are outside of an app over to a web store. If you're driving users at a 14 to even ideally within the first 3 to 6 months, 50% rate, you're looking at much higher profitability levels, more in the 100% year-over-year profitability levels.
Yeah, but let's be very careful with some of the statements that get thrown out here. Converting players really depends on your game and how you monetize in your game. So if you take a more casual game, a lot of the spend will be at the point of pressure in the game where somebody wants those extra moves. That's not an experience you want to take somebody out to a web shop for because that's just it's kind of so you need to think about where the planned spend is and that behavior as well. So if you have a high level of planned spend, then you're going to potentially get a higher value from a web store. But then you also got to think about the friction as well. So it's a question also then thinking about what bundle size, etc., that people purchase. So, but I think the only way to do this is to test and understand. But you need to be careful because what you're not trying to do is have unintended consequences of changing player behavior in your games either.
Right, and just to that point, to address that point, I mean, and this goes back to Jessica's point, you want an audience engagement platform that's an extension of your actual game, right? To not disturb the user from flow of game to flow to Game Hub. I have always said that I think a traditional web shop is a finance-based solution to address a gaming problem. If you create a hub, like a gaming hub, that is a direct extension of your game. That is a gaming solution to a gaming problem that also hosts a store. And you can use live ops in a game hub to drive users to maximize their engagement rates to transaction flow. But if you are, if you're just kind of setting up a web shop and throwing 6 different icons of in-app purchases on the web shop and seeing how you can market users over to the web shop and hope that they transact, that's a finance solution to a gaming problem. So I think to David's point, I mean, you do have to also be wary of where are the users going, how engaged are they with your brand. I mean, think about it. There's another way to market content outside of web shop in the sense of how do brands communicate with their users? If a user comes to an app store and says, I am disappointed with this update in your game because there are a lot of crashes. How does that brand communicate, outside of Discord maybe, how does that brand communicate with the user to say, hey, this update was just done to fix your user complaints because we're communicating with you now outside the Game Hub? I mean, from a creative standpoint, it's endless. You can, a one-stop content shop that is an extension of your game with a store, it's pretty cool.
if we stay on this topic for now, because I think people will ultimately be interested. Conor, you've talked about how Aghanim approaches this, but and David, you touched on it a bit before. But if you are trying to direct users to a commerce page directly, what are some of the strategies for doing that and maximizing the value for that? Ultimately, it's hopefully I'm getting this the right way around, but it's tax avoidance rather than tax evasion. This is all it's all within the guidelines, but how do you navigate those guidelines, which are constantly shifting and will probably shift again, but maximize value by driving users directly or indirectly to commerce pages?
Yeah, I don't like to think personally the fees by the platforms as taxes. Like, they do deliver, I feel, a great value. I think that having that much of your revenue taken away from all of your players can be very difficult for your business. Tim of Epic Sweeney recently reported that with a 30% cut, the platforms would make more on Epic games than Epic makes on their games. And so that's a very difficult position to be in. I think when it comes to a web shop, there is kind of this pure commercial element to it. If I'm a VIP, I personally love VIP over the term whale, but if I'm a VIP and I'm spending hundreds or thousands of dollars a month on a game, going to a web shop, and David, you mentioned earlier, what is the value we can deliver for these players? Paying closer to 5% or whatever it is from a app marketplace payment provider allows you to make more profit, but it also allows these players to get more value for the money that they spend.
Right.
And so there is that kind of pure commercial aspect to it. But and I really like the points you were making, Conor, and David, you as well, around making your website an experience. It's not just about a shop, it's about the user account and what they see when they log in. It's about content, it's about leaderboards, it's around community, more than just maybe even links to a Discord server or whatever. But it's about owning the relationship with your players and not just renting the relationship with your players from platforms. To me, that's what a full web experience for your players is about. It's not just the shop. It's not just about avoiding the fees. It's about owning the relationship with your players.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about creating an ecosystem that is absolutely well integrated to your game, and anything you experience on your game on your web store or on this direct-to-consumer platform has to be exactly the same experience as the game. So you have to really understand the players' behaviors. You have to understand also the finesse of game development, of what makes the experience great, and how you're gonna take that and really recreate that on the web, right? Because you don't want to have just a web store that is disconnected to your game and disconnected from your players. So this ecosystem is very, very important to create, and the experience needs to be there, absolutely.
And that's why some companies as well are developing. We've developed a live ops program, right? So once a user actually gets to our game hub, we're able to address, hey, does this user have an LTV of over $100 and a level of over 20 in Angry Birds, right? And then we can use that and we can say, why don't we discount this reward in a live op scenario, in a pop-up scenario, once they get to the game hub at 10%, and only give it to them for the next 20 minutes so we can drive them direct to the user, to the kind of transaction flow as easy as possible. There are a lot of companies that are now doing that, where they're looking at user profiles and they're saying, how do we deliver the best possible reward to this user, where it's incentivizing for the user to return, as well as loyalty programs, as well as incentivizing for the publisher to use based on the transaction rates that are happening post reach. So that's a really interesting thing. I think that assessing user profiles and making sure that you are as compelling and tailored and customized to each individual user as possible is key in the next stage of DTC platform kind of efficiency.
How do you see, we've talked about kind of this is the 1%, the 2% of, VIP players ultimately right now are the people that are going to be most engaged with these experiences. But how do you see that evolving, potentially from your point of view, David, with Rovio, maybe it's slightly different ultimately, and you have a higher proportion of players kind of visiting the additional content. How do you see that evolving? Do you think these alternative touch points will become more relevant to a larger number of players over time, or will it continue to be, for now, this subsection of VIPs?
Yeah, I see the broader opportunity as well. Yeah, and I'll give you an example. This is hypothetical, but if you've seen with the original Angry Birds movie and Angry Birds movie 2, there was a lot of brand engagement with, for example, you went to McDonald's and these kind of, and these brands want digital experiences as well. So why wouldn't we bring those people into the domain that we have and then bring them into the game? So it's also the question of actually could also be a means of bringing players in. And I think also you've got to think about the web user acquisition is cheaper than mobile as well. So maybe there's an opportunity as well that whether you've got play on the web or whether you're using it as a landing site to bring new players in. So I think there's many opportunities to this as well. So.
The other thing is if you make just from DTC kind of an enablement solution perspective, if you're making your rewards, if you're discounting your rewards to a point where maybe non-paying users, traditionally non-paying users who are traditionally ad viewers, who do not pay, who do not buy IAPs in-game, if you're making them more affordable for these users, then you can actually market to, you're not just looking at a net revenue increase on traditionally paying users, you're looking at new user acquisition for in-app payers. And with loyalty programs and kind of other programs that bring users back, you can turn your traditionally non-paying users into paying users via reward systems. So that's another big opportunity in this space.
Maybe I can add as well is if you talk to Google, they will also tell you that having an email address will help you with user acquisition as you go forward because they can. So there's also potential, the fact that because you've got first-party data, then it will give you new capabilities as well to reach players and reacquire those players. So.
In a similar vein, I guess, in terms of engaging new players, does a D2C strategy and the diversity that might allow, for example, in payments and payment methods, for example, does that unlock new players potentially in new geos, giving players essentially their preferred way to pay?
I think so. I mean, Apple and Google don't support every local payment method on earth, and so you have the local payment benefit of having a web shop and being able to support that. The other thing is that players don't always find it convenient or have ready access to use a different credit card on their Apple or Google account. So if they get that gift card from a friend or parent or grandparent, it can be difficult for them to use that. The example I gave in the prior presentation of my son with the Visa gift card, that money would have been spent on something else if he didn't have the option to spend it on the store. So I do think it is about like converting existing revenue into higher margin D2C, but it's also about slurping up, revenue that you weren't going to get anyways that was going to be used at some, laser tag game or something like that, rather than on your game.
Another thing here, it depends on your strategy, right? I mean, there are certain, for us individually, our strategy is to convert, maybe not whales, maybe we'll call them VIPs.
Oh, whatever.
I like that name better, by the way. But it's to convert VIPs over to the DTC enablement platform, right? So if you're converting that 0.5 to 2% of users that are driving really the lion's share of revenue in your game, and you're converting them over, they typically have credit cards, they typically have kind of via an API connection, they typically have the Apple Wallet, the Google Wallet. So in that way, kind of all of these kind of additional payment kind of tools are distant from that type of strategy, but it depends what type of strategy you're looking for. There are strategies that do the opposite, the inverse.
I think the strategy is the point where you should start. It's a question of where your audience is and how they spend that money, and think about that. I think that you can build out a lot of capabilities. But I would start with fundamentally what do you want to offer to your core players, and then how do you extend that? And you can add multiple payment vendors. Let's be clear, you can be payment vendor agnostic, and actually there might be benefits to that because some vendors will be better in some markets than others. It's not just about the percentage you pay; it's about the percentage of transactions that get completed, and these kind of things. And you can even A/B test. If you have the tooling to do that, but I would fundamentally start with, who you're trying to reach, how are you going to bring the value, and then work out what your roadmap to achieve that is. And I would, if you can, try and be agnostic to one platform or one vendor. But obviously that's easy for me to say with resources I have, or Supercell to say, or Zynga, etc. So you may have to bet on somebody, as well. So.
Really interesting question for me, I think, is as we talked about Epic, for example, as the distribution landscape kind of changes with the Epic Game Store, upcoming probably Microsoft Store, Alt Store, Aptoid, if you're looking to potentially distribute your game on more of these channels, how does that affect the D2C space with the range of options, opportunities, and commissions that are charged across all of these platforms?
First and foremost, you're going to need to keep up with the terms of each of those marketplaces and how they approach direct to consumer. We've kind of been using a broad stroke in these talks and talking about Apple and Google's rules, but you just introduced a whole bunch of other rules. So I think that's the first thing to consider. What do marketplaces fundamentally bring? They bring convenience for the player, they bring convenience for the publisher, and they bring eyeballs to the publisher. I remember my first job on the internet, my boss said, the internet is about one thing, it's about the battle between eyeballs and content. And so these marketplaces like Epic and Microsoft and Apple and Google are bringing players. Now we saw earlier in the presentation before this, only about 15% of game downloads are driven from App Store shopping, but there is this eyeball effect that are bringing players to your game. So personally, I like to take advantage of as many eyeball buckets as I can, but from a direct-to-consumer perspective, you're going to need to look really closely at the rules for each store. I don't know what y'all think.
So my personal view on this is, we will see radical changes over the coming years. And there's a lot of legislation out there. And to be honest with you, a lot of the legislation doesn't help because actually it creates barriers. It adds a lot of complexity both to the consumer and the publisher. So let's say, I don't think we're near a perfect outcome at this point. And of course, we all would like to get more money from the players, but let's also, I would start with, where are the players that you want to reach? Where, what channels can you reach them through? And if Epic Store, obviously, they're going to be really successful with Fortnite. They've got a massive game there, and if you want to be close to those players, maybe it's an opportunity for you. They won't suit everyone. It's not going to be a hyper-casual marketplace, for example. So I think that you really think about, again, your audience, how you're going to reach them, which app stores help you do that the most.
To David's point, and also just to your question, the legislation, I think we're going in a direction where certain states, and I don't mean obviously the United States, but certain countries are pushing, South Korea, Japan, obviously the United States, Europe, collection of countries, are really pushing for less stringent rules around developer and publisher freedom. And I think that we're really going in a direction where the Apple and Google duopoly or monopoly, whether or not you're focused on the store or the ecosystem, is going to become less and less stringent on the publisher and on the developer. And in that, we will have a huge change in how publishers and developers are able to monetize their users without kind of these heavy fees.
To bring it back, I guess, to closing before questions, in terms of the features of a D2C strategy or web store or game hub, whatever the respective terminology is, what's one thing you've seen to be most effective in terms of an engagement mechanism or piece of content that users are really valuing on a D2C platform?
For us, it's the icon in game. We're putting icons and buttons in game that lead directly to content. Once a user gets directly to the game hub via their game ID, they get to the game hub. They're already logged into the game hub. Once they're at the game hub, they can explore all content associated with Rovio or Angry Birds, for instance. And then from there, our live ops tool drives them to maximize the chances of transaction. So I think for us specifically, that icon in game is very, explore more content on this game hub has been phenomenal for user engagement and transaction rates.
I can add on that. I think loyalty program in general as a feature has a great opportunity to really drive players to your store and re-engage them, because you can develop a loyalty program that integrates directly into your game and have a progression for users, to progress, to gain points, to spend them, for example, on your store. And then all of this communicates to the game, so you also can earn those points in the game and then spend them back to the store. So you can create this loop of progression between the game and your store. So loyalty programs, I feel, really brings a lot of value for players.
For sure.
Maybe I'm not going to point to one feature, because I think fundamentally you should be thinking about what you bring to the players in your game. What I will say is really understand your audience, run surveys, understand, test ideas with them. I think what you will find with your spenders spend in your game because they love the game and play the game, and they are your most engaged members of your audience. So serve them. This is an opportunity to serve them. What we've seen is that those are the players that sign up to Red ID and will then want more, and want more conversation with the game developer, want to understand, what features are coming, all of these kind of things. So really think about understanding your audience and what they're looking for.
Shall we open to the floor? Has anybody got any questions?
Any questions for our panelists? I guess I have a question. So I guess is there anything a publisher might do that actually means that I'm getting close to the speaker? Is there anything a publisher might do that actually makes, trying to think how to word it, like if you did something wrong on your D2C platform, then you could actually drive players away. So what are some things to actually avoid doing? So you said like what to do, but what shouldn't you do that maybe you've even seen developers do? In-app ads.
I mean, throwing in interstitials and rewarded videos on your web store might not be, too practical. I think there's a larger point there. I mean, I say that in jest. Nobody's doing that. But I think that making the experience annoying, for lack of a better way of saying it, is going to drive users away. I think that there are various levers of making, David kind of nailed it on the head, right? You want to make the user experience fun. You want to make the web store or the game hub or whatever you're calling it as close to your game as possible so that you have a seamless transition from game to game hub or game to web store, where the user does not feel like they're in a position where they are not interacting with your brand or your game. And I think the more distant you become in terms of that branding, the more that you will lose kind of user return rates, I guess is the best way to put it.
Jessica, David, anything
I think
to add?
Don't try and change your players' behavior on how they spend. I think I mentioned this. If your players spend in the game, while they're playing the game, then that needs to be a frictionless experience. So really understand where the opportunity is to have a web shop and what in-app purchases make sense, what offers make sense. If you've got a season pass, maybe that's the thing that you start with, for example. That's more of a planned purchase than while you're playing the game purchase. So really think about that and don't because if you change the player behavior, you may lose money. Yeah, if you try to change that, but you should try and get people to maybe buy more season passes, but that doesn't mean, that's an increase. You shouldn't be hitting, if your game has 90% revenue from elsewhere, you need to make sure you retain that as well.
So it's all about understanding your players' motivations and really adding value. So I think if you look at, again, the limitations, like what you can do better, and then bring more value, better content at a better price, I don't think you can go wrong with that. Yeah. So it's pretty much about that, and keep the experience, as Conor and David was saying, the experience really close to your game.
Mm. So don't launch an NFT collection for your...
Right, exactly.
And I would underline, it's really important to have kind of user insight. And so if you can run surveys in your game, then test these ideas, get the feedback of what people value and what they don't value, and before you start building, really do that user insight research, and continue to do it as you evolve. So,
the only thing I would add to this is don't be callous with security and compliance on your web shop. In the mobile platforms, there's a lot of guardrails when it comes to security and compliance, and you're going to have the world at your fingertips when it comes to your web shop. So don't be callous with your player data. Don't be callous with your privacy and compliance. Don't be callous with your security. These are all freebies when people make transactions in mobile shops. And on your web shop, that's your team's responsibility, and you can outsource some of this and offload to vendors, but make sure you cover this. This is super critical. The player's experience and safety is foremost, in my opinion, above almost anything.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody. Craig, send us off.
Yeah, thank you so much. Please give a big round of applause to the panel. That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good job.